According to the 2021 Crime and Report in Kentucky, youth under 17 represented 414 assault charges, 29 homicide arrests, 32 robbery arrests, and 95 weapons violations. Now, this is only a snapshot because not all youth-involved crime results in arrest. For over 10 years, I've worked with what we label as at-risk youth, and one of the trends I've found that most of these kids just want a safe space to be authentic and vulnerable in a world that's quick to judge, but slow to forget. For 5 years, I worked at an alternative school where majority of our population had some involvement with some form of the juvenile court system. Now, during these 5 years, I often heard comments like, "Oh, you work at the school with the bad kids," or "Isn't that where all those juvenile delinquents are?" Or my favorite one was, "Aren't you afraid that these kids are going to rob you or hurt you?" First response always was, "I wish those kids would. I am not the one. Don't let the size fool you." Second response is, "I don't see labels. I see youth in pain. I see youth that are misguided, misjudged. I see youth that need to be shown a different way." A lot of times, these youth just want to be heard, want to be seen. And what do kids do when they want to be seen? Good attention, bad attention, it's attention. This results in shootings in malls, drive-bys in broad daylight, riots and fights throughout the school, and kids being recognized with bringing weapons to school at an alarming rate just to feel safe. Well, now they're seen, now they're heard, but now they're labeled. For over 20 years, we give these kids labels such as super predators, thugs, criminals, gangbangers, and to tell my age, baby's kids. But ultimately, they just want to be seen, want to be embraced. But just like adult offenders in this world, when they're given this label, they're silenced. An old African proverb states that children who do not feel embraced by their village will burn it down to the ground to feel its worth. Well, I don't know about y'all, but it's hot. So a lot of times we think, what do? How do we keep these kids from burning things down to the ground? Fast forward to the 21st century, these kids aren't carrying torches. They have access to violence and weapons at an alarming rate due to social media and other internet outlets. So, how do we embrace them? Social theorists would say that giving them labels just further promotes them to try to emulate the label that they're given. Now, this is criticized because people will say, well, what if we just get rid of labels? Would we get rid of violence? Well, no. We have to look at the other contributing factors, the root causes to some of these youth-involved violent behaviors. One in which is profound, exposure to trauma. Now, Dr. Bruce Perry is a pioneer for how trauma affects the brain and behavior. I could bore you on another whole TEDx on what trauma does to the brain. But the main thing is that most of the time, you do not have access to the front part of your brain. Dr. Bruce Perry and a lot of his research show that in an arousal state, you only have access to your brain stem in which you cannot make alarming decisions at that moment. So a lot of times, you're not even thinking straight, but yet we're treating them like adults, charging them like adults, but not embracing them, not listening to them. I will never forget when I met a 17-year-old kid who looked me dead in my eye and told me that he would be lucky if he made it to his 18th birthday. I just thought, why do you feel that way? Why can't anything change? He broke eye contact and told me that he didn't choose this life, the life chose him. He wouldn't wish it on anybody, but it was too late to change anything. I explained to him what trauma meant, how it can affect your brain, your behavior, your decisions. He didn't know any of it. He explained maybe if somebody had educated him on that, maybe back in middle school, he might actually give somebody a chance to show him that there was a different way. We went on to talk about what was some of the sources of his pain. His pain was lodged in the bullet that killed his best friend right in his arms. Death wasn't new to him. The burden he had to carry was the bullet that killed his best friend was really meant for him because of the life he chose. Every action has a reaction, and unfortunately his grief had a reaction that ultimately did take his life just weeks before his 18th birthday. Now there's thousands of stories like this all over this country. Kentucky is not the only one who suffers with a lot of youth-involved violence. So what do? When talking with some of the youth, they tell me the kill or be killed mentality. They rather have a gun than not have a gun because people just don't fight anymore. You can't be so sure that someone's going to catch some feelings when you start to actually win and try to up the ante to bring a gun. So I'd rather have my gun than not have my gun, even at school. So the million-dollar question is, how do we prevent these fires? In some literature by Dr. Ford and other colleagues, they revealed that oftentimes complex trauma shows in oppression, anger, aggression, anxiety, but conduct. These are the things that we are labeling these kids with, rather than hearing their stories, giving them some healing engagement to actually tell us what it is that they want. Through obtaining narratives from some of these kids with lived experiences, it can be the foundation to some of the programs that we build to help unify the kids who are too late or prevent the kids who are the siblings of these kids who are watching this day in and day out. We throw millions of dollars at programs to these people, or throw millions of dollars to these programs every year, and they just don't seem to work because we are not using the voices of these kids that we are expecting to actually participate in these programs. These kids are motivated by money, safety, and sometimes even power. Not power because they're trying to be grown, which we know they are, but power in knowing that they have some sense of self, that they're being seen, they're being heard. I have a former student that was sitting awaiting a youthful offender charge because he was in the wrong place at the wrong time with a friend he didn't know had a gun. When I went to the jail to interview him after, like, dude, what are you doing? The first thing he says, Ms. Gentry, I didn't even do anything. But now they say I'm a criminal. He's not a criminal. I had to write a letter to the judge that stated all his strengths. I wasn't even invited to the hearing to be able to say this is what he was doing prior to this one incident that is life-changing. But thank goodness the judge was trauma-informed. That letter, among other mentors and advocates in that kid's life, allowed for him to have a second chance where he graduated. He still kind of catches up with me on Instagram every now and then. He has 2 beautiful kids, being able to work and give them what he didn't have. That wouldn't have been possible if he wasn't seen and heard at the time. Now, I can't do this alone. More community partners need to come together and use the voices of our youth and the strength and support to help some of these youth see a different path. We don't always need to be competing with one another just because, yes, we need money to live, I get it. But we can collaborate more to secure more social connections and be more trauma-informed to understand, to use the term, like Dr. Bruce Perry says, what happened to you versus what are you doing? Let's break the labels, open our ears, open our arms, and prevent the fires. Thank you.